Dan Haugen, and I want to welcome you again and thank you for joining us in these small group sessions. My name, again, is Dan Haugen. I'm a member of the Wayzata Legislative Action Committee. I'll be facilitating tonight's discussion, and we have timekeepers, and Amy Wallstein will be circulating with cards for questions if we have some time for those. I'm going to begin this portion of the forum by asking each of the candidates 2 prepared questions, and we'll then open the forum up for questions from the audience again if we have time. Each candidate will have 1 minute. We're going to shorten things to 1 minute to respond. Please feel free to give shorter answers, as this will free up more time for additional questions. As a reminder, the timekeeper will hold up a yellow card when 15 seconds remain and a red card when time has expired, and we will need to respect that, especially now. We thank everyone in advance for their cooperation in treating all participants in tonight's event with courtesy and respect at all times, just like we saw in the last hour, and thank you for that. Here's the second question. Wayzata schools are also committed to providing an excellent education to each and every student, including those who qualify for special education services that are required by the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. Special education costs are, however, largely underfunded, resulting in significant budget stress as districts are forced to cover this cross-subsidy or shortfall. More specifically, in 2015, 7.5% of Wayzata's operating budget, or $9.2 million, were taken from the general operating fund to cover this shortfall in special education state funding. How would you address this growing special education cross-subsidy or shortfall? Each candidate, again, will have 1 minute to respond. And our first respondent is Dennis Smith.
Thank you. As I mentioned earlier, mandates can be troublesome, especially when they're unfunded. And when the federal government or the state government leaves local school districts on the hook for an unfunded mandate, then that needs to be funded if it's deemed that is a program that is necessary. So in this case, it is necessary, and we need to find a way to increase the funding for those particular programs without penalizing the school's other operating funds. And that can be done through a variety of ways. One is making sure that education is funded first. It's in our state constitution that providing education for our citizens is one of the few things that were mandated by our constitution, and we should recognize that, properly fund education in that sense, and then continue to look at which of these mandates are necessary, the other ones, and which ones we could do without.
Thank you, Dennis. Our next respondent is Warren Limmer.
Well, unfunded mandates are definitely an issue in our school districts. I live in the Osseo School District, and at one time they really encouraged special ed parents with kids like that to come to the school. And being a realtor, I had lots of consumers specifically wanting to move into the Osseo School District, only to trigger a greater unfunded budget deficit as they tried to offer that program, which created even more problems. Congress created that unfunded mandate, as many of you know, and Congress should have put money where their mouth was, but they didn't. So we're ending up with the problem. I don't know if there's a clear answer or immediate answer right now. I think we need to give school districts more flexibility. If you put money into a special, and that I think would help some districts, maybe not all of them, but some of them.
Thank you, Warren. Our next respondent is Marie Thomas.
Yes, I mean, we've talked about the unfunded mandate, and obviously taking care of students, children with special needs is important. It's critical. We have to do it. Funding it, I like the idea of making the funding commitment to the schools in such a way that they have the flexibility to provide the services. We can't run away from this. It's front and center, and we've got to find a way to fund not only this mandate but many others. I like the idea, as I think Mr. Lemmer said, that is it a problem that we can address by increasing the amount of money we give the schools so that they can find a way to best put these programs forward.
Thank you, Noreen. Our next respondent is Jerry Hertos.
Well, thank you. This is a growing problem at the state legislature and one of concern for all of the different districts. What is very apparent is districts cannot plan or cannot know students that are moving into the district that would require an IEP, an individualized education plan. And they don't know what the cost would be. Under the current system, it's somewhat stacked against the receiving school district in that no matter what the plan is, if the parents advocate for it, if there's disagreement about what's needed, education professionals maybe disagree with the parent. Under the current system, the parent can get an attorney and the school district has to pay for the parent's attorney as well as defend themselves in these actions in IEP plans. So with that in mind, there could be some reform in that area. We want kids with special needs to get the education that they need, and it's very important to do that. And I think that we could probably try to establish at the legislature some type of funding mechanism that could be cost shared or pooled against all the districts across the state for a certain amount or a certain excess above and beyond what is budgeted or planned for. That might be a possible solution to helping out a little bit. Thank you.
Thank you, Jerry. Our next respondent is Ann Taylor.
Well, I have a brother with autism. He's adopted. Had him since he's in our home since 3 days old. So I know firsthand how important this is, especially for special ed students. And unfunded mandates, we cannot have any more of that. There's too many. In looking at some of the LAC programs, whether it's here or in another school district as well, one of our neighboring school districts, and I'm sure it's happening here too, there's too many dual requirements, which is hindering some of the other state statutes and laws as well. So I think to clean up some of that is really important, and yeah, I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Ann. Our next respondent is Ron Lutz.
None of us here can change the federal system right now. We can rant against unfunded mandates, but we have to deal with it. And dealing with it here requires money. So I think you need to consider whether the candidates before you are willing to support a level of state revenue that will enable the state to budget and appropriate funds to help the local school districts deal with their special education needs. I spoke to a group 15 years ago in Minnetonka of parents who wanted to talk to me about their kids who had special needs, and a huge national debate on whether taxes should be raised at that time. And almost every one of them supported raising taxes at that time, but if you'd ask them abstractly, they would say, no, don't raise any more taxes. But they supported it because they wanted to have the funds available for their own family's needs, for their own kids' needs. We need legislators that are going to come to the state and say, we're willing to provide sufficient revenues at the state level to make the investments here in special education, in early childhood education, in pre-K, and all the other things on the formula, everything else. Otherwise, you're talking out one side of your mouth here and the other side over there.
Thank you, Ron. Sherry Pugh.
Well, everyone's talked about the unfunded mandate, but I think one of the areas we haven't talked about is I've been door knocking through many neighborhoods, talking to teachers in special ed and families with special ed, is that there are some fundamental issues in the system. The paperwork, the fact that these children are very mobile. I didn't realize that they're traveling sometimes between campuses for different things. And so I think that the funding is an issue, but we always have to look at the total story. And the total story talks about the sort of processing that the students are going through. And how can we improve that? Because that could be a cost savings in this process. And it could also be a way of humanitizing some of the things that people go through which they feel have not been sensitive enough to their needs. So I think that, yes, we need to deal with the funding part, but we also need to look at the systematic system and make systematic change.
Thank you, Sherry. And our last respondent to this question is Jay Nygaard.
And I do have an answer for this one. And it is, if you're gonna mandate, you need to fund it. And I'd rather have our federal government petition the heck out of them, get rid of this Common Core junk, which I just do not appreciate, being a scientist and engineer and math kind of guy. And I'd rather have them put money into something like this. I had a kid who had special needs, and they were emotional type needs, but it was very, very helpful that he had the help he had at the school when he had it there. So I understand the value of it. We just need to find a way to either get them to fund it or to shift our funds to it is what it comes down to. And, you know, other than raising taxes on a population that's very, very weary of raising taxes, the only thing I can suggest is let's clear the business climate so we can grow our businesses, so we can produce more taxes and higher paying jobs so we have the money.
Thank you, Jay. I've been given a note that suggests we can go another 10 minutes or so, if that's okay with the audience. I'm gonna pick one question from the audience, and then each of the candidates will also be given a minute to make a closing statement. So it's probably gonna be more like about 12 after, or 13 after when we're done, but I hope that that's respectful of your time tonight. Here's the question from the audience. Wayzata is a district growing much faster than other districts in the state. As a legislator, how would you help the Wayzata district manage its growth? And the first respondent is Sherry Pugh.
That's really an interesting topic. As I understand the Wayzata district, one is your geography of the district is really large. And that large geography used to not have a lot of houses in it. It used to be farms, and so as houses have built, that has put pressure on it. I also know from my experience, excuse me, in working in North Minneapolis, that there were 70 children every year bused from North Minneapolis because they wanted to be in the Wayzata School District because of its excellence. And so I know that there's also the challenges of children coming in, and that's healthy because it adds to the diversity. But, you know, I've lost my train of thought on this whole thing. But, you know, just, I think that the school has to, I don't know how you can stop growing other than to draw boundaries that become smaller, or build other excellent schools around you so that they attract more students away from you.
Thank you, Sherry. Warren Limmer.
This reminds me of another school district that I have in my district, the Elk River District. Rogers is the area in that district that's still in Hennepin County. And a few years ago, they started to experience explosive growth from Zimmerman to Elk River to Otsego and Rogers area all at once. It was just incredibly difficult for the school district to accommodate that type of growth everywhere in their district. And I spoke with both Democrat and Republican colleagues of mine, and we crafted a bill to recognize that type of explosive growth, a percentage of growth that quickly comes up, and it would last for a number of years while we're adjusting to it. And it would be a categorical aid. And I think that is probably the direction that I would suggest right now, a categorical aid, kind of an emergency fund for maybe 10 or 15 years until you start adjusting to your fast growth.
Thank you, Warren. Jay Nygaard.
Well, it's not just a Wayzata issue, this is a statewide issue. All the schools are growing and expanding, and, you know, to be honest, there's been a population explosion in the state since I was born. It just keeps going and going, so it's gonna be an issue, and it's gonna continue to be, especially with all the immigration. In Mound, when they just built or passed a referendum that I was definitely against, they ended up paying 3 times as much as they needed to for a building, okay? That's a big problem to me. I don't mind them having the building, but why are we spending so much for what other school districts spent less for? And that's something that we can do statewide, is we can find some way to put together a committee, commission, whatever, that deals with all the building needs and the expansion needs and looks at all of it, and uses the weight of the whole school system for every building project, so we can minimize costs and build what we need to in an effective manner.
Thank you, Jay. Our next respondent is Nori Thomas.
Well, I think that we've heard a lot of different ideas that all make some sense. And first of all, it's planning. You really need to work with your community and civic leaders and school and teachers and real estate developers to find out, well, what is the long term? You can't just plan for a year. You've got to plan for at least 10 years, I would imagine. And you maybe need to even imagine what's going to happen to these buildings and to these schools when you don't need as many. I've been in school districts that have declined. So planning is key. It's long-term planning. It's also an opportunity to bring civic leaders in, to talk with parents about the need, and to bring in business. Business can perhaps offer some solutions as well. It's really a time for the community to come together, and you should use it as a way to really bring this togetherness to find these solutions that are not easy.
Thank you, Nori. Our next respondent is Jerry Hertos.
Well, this is an interesting situation. Being a real estate person, I find that over the last 25 years, I'm just astounded how a relocation or a transferee knows that they want to live in the Wayzata School District. And why do they want to do that? They do that because 60% of all home buying decisions are made with children in mind. And somehow the industry seems to let all these people know that Wayzata School District is at or near the top of the pile with regard to doing a great job with students. Now, not everybody moving into the district is necessarily a newcomer to the state. Yeah, they may be relocated from another area. And student growth, student population is a little bit like an enterprise fund, because with each new student comes new state aid as part of the formula. So there is more revenue that's coming. If it's a space issue, then that's generally levied against the tax capacity of the district. And if you're building 100 new houses at $500,000 apiece, you've got more tax capacity to spread that out. But it is a problem that some school districts would like to have, and other ones that are facing challenges with that issue.
Thank you, Jerry. Ann Taylor.
Well, I would say, in my experience in working in the Wayzata Community District, it was probably around 2008, it's been a while, but it's continuing to grow, and that hasn't changed. So I would say we definitely need to continue to support our local programs, especially in this district. Interfaith Outreach and Community Partners is a huge proponent. You need to keep it local and engage our local businesses. The schools are definitely going to be affected as that continues to grow. And yes, we are receiving, I know the Wayzata School District does get a lot of out-of-school districts, or a lot of children from the out-of-school districts, say in North Minneapolis, and they are being bused here. There were some issues around that, but you know what, the community figured out a way to solve it. The teachers figured out a way to solve it. Volunteers, AmeriCorps and volunteers, there's a way to utilize some of that as well. And you know, I think about how long it took for some of the buildings to grow here, particularly down the condominiums, and then where IOCP is now located. There was some time in that and some financial issues, but eventually it got done.
Thank you, Ann. Our next respondent is Ron Lutz.
I think frankly this is mostly not a state issue. I mean, I can't think of a lot of things, maybe something along the lines of what Senator Limmer was talking about. But beyond that, this is really an issue for local school districts to sort out. And you've got tax capacity, it's limited. You've got money coming in with students, that's limited. You know, what really frustrates me are districts that complain about growth but aren't willing to support levies in a referendum. And then they turn to the state and ask for help. So ultimately, if a district is growing and they're putting the infrastructure pieces into place in that community to encourage growth, they have to plan and expect to have more students in their school districts and plan their funding accordingly. And I'm going to have to excuse myself, I have kids to pick up. So, the post 8 o'clock did create a little bit of an issue for me, so thank you for the opportunity and have a good evening.
Ron, do you want to make a final set of comments right now? And put you first on the list?
Sure, thank you. You know, I'm running for re-election this year, and I've really enjoyed my service in the legislature. Education has been the #1 priority in Senate District 46 since I've represented this community. It will continue to be, and I, for one, continue to put my money where my mouth is in terms of supporting adequate revenues at the state so we can provide adequate funding for our schools. I encourage you to judge all the candidates by that measuring stick. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ron. Our final speaker with regard to the question from the audience is Dennis Smith.
Thank you. The program that Senator Limmer and Senator Lance outlined, I think is is something worth considering. While it is perhaps a regional issue and not statewide, it can have a crippling effect upon the community, so we need to look to address that. One way we can continue to help out those school districts is to have the funding that the state legislature does approve to be general money on the formula. So local control is incredibly important, so those school districts can choose to spend those funds as they see fit to take care of those individual issues that they have.
Thank you, Dennis, and thank you everyone for your patience with this extended few minutes. And I want to just give the candidates an opportunity to make a final statement as they see fit, and we'll offer 1 minute for each of those statements. So Ron has spoken, and Taylor.
Well, it's been wonderful to be here tonight. And education is about the enrichment and improvement of our children in society. And it's obvious to me that the schools do need to be adequately funded. I would propose that any new law that's introduced that affects education, that it must have the funding attached. It's obvious that there seems to be, again, some dueling requirements of other states and statutes. We need to comb through that. It's important to keep accountability as well as efficiency in the school, as well as recognizing, especially in a district like this or any community, to really support at the local level. That's imperative. There's things here that I definitely can support, and when elected, I will continue to work bipartisan as I have with the data bill this year. I will fight for this, and I do hope to have your vote in November.
Thank you, Ann. Dennis Smith.
Good evening. It's been a pleasure to be with you this evening. I represent Maple Grove, District 34B. I am seeking re-election. I'm just completing my first term. Education is incredibly important to me. If you look at my voting record, you will see that I continue to vote for local control, fiscal responsibility, while also voting for one of the largest increases in general revenue spending on education in the history of the state legislature. And I'm very proud of that. That is very important. I will continue to have education as a hallmark of my tenure at the state legislature, and I ask for your vote on November 8th, and thank you for having us here this evening.
Thank you, Dennis. Jay Nygaard.
Yeah, thank you for having me. You know, I'm really getting to enjoy these because I learned so much from everybody. It's quite interesting, but you know, as far as education goes, with my background, I am a rights and liberty kind of guy, and it is in the Constitution we have a right to an education. So it's something that's very important to me, and it's something that's important to everyone. You know, of course, I graduated Orono, like I said, public school. I loved going there, and I always like to be proud of the fact that everybody who graduated there could read a newspaper and do their checkbook. And that wasn't true everywhere. You know, it's a lot different now with technology and all that. We need to keep up with it, but all I know is I'm definitely supportive of education, but we have to find a way to make do with what we have, and that's something I'm good at. I've always been my life has been making do with what I have, and that's something that I plan to bring to government, so we can solve problems here and not put more burdens on the people.
Thank you, Jay. Sherry Pugh.
Well, thank you for having us all here this evening. It's been quite a joy, and I hope that you will give me your vote on November 8th for Senate District 33. Education is a right that we should all be afforded in this country, and excellence in education that is equitably available to all is imperative. as we move forward into the future. I want to work with all of the residents, the students, the mothers, the fathers, the superintendents, the teachers, to make excellence in education in our district and statewide. Thank you for having me this evening.
Thank you, Sherry. Jerry Hertos.
Well, thank you. It's been an honor and a privilege to be serving as your state representative. When I first showed up in 2012, I didn't necessarily know the committees I was going to be assigned to. And, you know, getting on the course of education was quite a challenge because it is half of our state spending. And it's challenging to learn all about the different funding formulas and what the application of that means to the students across the state. But having been there now for 4 years, I feel I'm in the saddle. I understand the system pretty well. I've advocated for and have chief authored legislation that has made a difference in our school district. I know some of my efforts last session meant about $1 million more for Rockford School District. We also had legislation that allowed school districts greater flexibility with those categorical spending that I had chief authored, and to create safer schools by using the school safety money for other things than just health and fire safety. But anyway, I feel I'm working hard to represent the district, and certainly education is an important part of it, and I thank you very much, and I ask for your vote for number 8. Thank you.
Thank you, Jerry. Warren Limmer.
Well, I want to thank you for coming out tonight. It's getting darker and colder out as we get closer to winter, so it's good for you to come out. It doesn't always happen with this many people in a room. And I also want to thank you for participating. Some of you probably don't even have kids of school age right now, and it's good to see that all of our citizens are concerned about quality education. I have about maybe 350 homes in the Wayzata School District. We have 3 other school districts that comprise most of my district. But I'm glad to have Wayzata represented in my Senate district. I want to thank you for coming out. We've heard some of your concerns through the questions that we have in front of us, and we'll be bringing them back to the legislature as some of our priorities. My door is always open, provided the public rehires me for the job. So the door is always open. Please call me, use email, whatever way. Stop me on a freeway. Anything it takes to get my attention. Thank you for coming out.
Thank you, Warren. And our final speaker tonight is Norrie Thomas.
Thank you. Thank you all for this opportunity. One of the reasons I'm running is that Minnesota's been great to me. The educational systems that allowed me to succeed and allowed me to find a satisfying career and a successful career, and to play a role in my profession as a leader both in this state and nationally. This state also allowed my children to succeed, 4 daughters who were educated here and who are well on their way to successful careers. I now have grandchildren. And as I see how education has changed, I want to be a champion for the next generations. And I would like to devote my time and energy to working with you and the schools in this state to really make sure our future generations have the great opportunities that I have. Thank you.
That's perfect timing, Norrie.
I saw the stop sign.
So on behalf of the, thank you, Norrie, on behalf of the Legislative Action Council and the Wayzata School District in general, I want to thank each of the candidates, the very thoughtful and articulate candidates, again, for taking the time to join us at this important event. I also want to thank our timekeepers and our question taker, and we've all greatly appreciated the opportunity to learn more about each of you. I also want to thank the audience for their attendance. So thank you.